So this week we will be looking at the perimeter, area, and volume of different shapes. And the perimeter we express in linear measurements. So like feet, inches, centimeters. The area we show in square measurements, like square feet, square inches, and square centimeters. And then the volume we show in cubic measurements, like cubic feet, cubic inches, and cubic centimeters. And we'll look a little bit more at what each of these looks like as we work through this material. So the perimeter is the distance around the outside of a shape. So if you think about if you're like walking around a track, how far you would walk as you go around the outside of that shape. Or if you're building a fence around your yard, how long will that fence be to wrap around something? Or if you want to put a ribbon border around something. That's your perimeter. It goes around the outside. And we find the perimeter by adding up the lengths of each side. So let's look at this example here. This trapezoid, it has 4 meters, 5 meters, 6 meters, and 5 meters. And we find the perimeter by adding those together. 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 5. The perimeter is 20 meters. Now we remember from last week that these little hash marks on the sides tell us that these two sides are the same, which means if I just have 5 meters written here, but I don't have it here, I know that they're the same because they both have one hash mark. So you'll see some things this week that are like this where we don't actually see all of the measurements, but we can use the other tools that we've been given to figure out what that other side would be. And then remember that if there are different numbers of hash marks, we want to match them. So here it's 1 and 1, which means these two lines are the same. So since this one's 10 meters, this one is also 10 meters. But here we have 2 and 2, which tells us if this one's 4 meters, this one is also 4 meters. So the ones with one hash mark are the same as each other, and the ones with 2 hash marks are the same as each other. Or in the case of this triangle here, all of the sides have different hash marks, 1, 2, and 3. We don't see this as often because obviously if you can see what all the measurements are, you can see that they're all different. However, you might see this. So if you do see this, just know that if you see 3 different hash marks or a different number of hash marks on each side, that means that each side has a different measure. So take just a minute, pause this video, and try to find the perimeter of the following polygons. All right, perfect. So with this first one, we see we have 2 hash marks on this side and this side, which means this side is also 8.2 feet. And then we have 1 hash mark here and 1 here, which means this is also 16.4 feet. And we can add those all together. So we have 8.2 plus 16.4 plus 8.2 plus 16.4, and we get 49.2 feet. Now this one we have a square and there's 1 hash mark on every side, which means each side is the same as each other. So I could do 1.9 plus 1.9 plus 1.9 plus 1.9, and I get 7.6 meters. And then on this last one, again, I have 1 hash mark here and 1 here, which means this side is the same as this side. So I have 13.5 plus 33.8 plus 13.5 plus 45.7. 106.5 meters. Now, sometimes you get a larger shape where you need to use what you know to determine what you don't know. So in this case here, I know that the top is 6 centimeters long. And I know that this is 2 centimeters here, but I don't know what this is. But I can see that the top and then these two bottom pieces, if they were next to each other, would be the same width. So if this is 2, this must be 4 down here, so that we have 6 centimeters on top and 6 centimeters on the bottom. And then the same here on the sides, I have 4 centimeters and 3 centimeters. If I put those together to make this one, I would have 7 centimeters. So with that in mind, I can now add up all of the sides again, where I have 7 plus 6 plus 4 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, and I get 26 centimeters. Pause this video and try to work out the perimeter of these two shapes. All right, so if we have 11 yards here, we must also have 11 yards total down here. And since we already have 4, this must be 7. And then since we have 3 and 2, this must be 5. So we can add those together. 11 plus 5 plus 7 plus 2 plus 4 plus 3, 32 yards. And then here as well, we have 5 here, and it's the same height over here. Even though we don't have those hash marks, we can see that it's the same height. So we have 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 5 plus 4, 20. Now, circles are a little bit different from polygons. For some weird reason, we don't use the word perimeter when we talk about the outside of a circle. We use the word circumference. So there are some different parts of the circle that we need to know. The circumference, as I said, is the distance around the outside of the circle. So again, it's like walking that track. It's basically the perimeter of the circle. But to find the circumference, we need to know the diameter. The diameter goes from one side of the circle to the opposite side, passing through the center. And then later, we will also need to know the radius. The radius is exactly half of the diameter. So it starts at the center of the circle and goes to the edge at any point. So the diameter is all the way across the circle. The radius is halfway across the circle. And we can find the circumference of the circle by using the number that we call pi. Pi is often simplified to 3.14. It's a much longer number. It's actually a never-ending number. However, we don't need to know that specific of the number, so we are going to use 3.14. Pi is the relationship between the diameter and the circumference of any circle. So if you take the diameter of any circle and multiply it by pi, you will get the circumference of that circle. Essentially, if I take this line, this diameter line, if I take 3.14 of them and wrap it around the outside of the circle, I'll make it all the way around the circle. So you might have a pi button on your calculator, but for most of the things, I want you to use 3.14. So let's look at what this might look like. On this circle here, we have a radius of 12 centimeters. Now, I remember that a radius is half of a diameter, so the diameter must be 24 centimeters. And to find the circumference, I take 24 times 3.14, and I get 75.36 centimeters. Now you'll notice here, sorry, I kind of drew through it, I don't have an exact equal sign here. I have these kind of wavy equal signs. And what that means is that it's approximately equal to, or it's close enough for our purposes. Now remember, I said pi is this infinite number. It's not just 3.14. It's 3.141592654 and so on. But we're not using that. We're using 3.14, which means our answers aren't going to be exactly 100% correct, but they will be close enough for our purposes. And that's why I use this squiggly equal sign. Either way, it'll work out fine. Pause this video and give these three a try. First, finding the diameter, and then finding the circumference of each circle. All right, so we've got our diameter here should be 10 yards, and then we have 3.14 times 10, which is 31.4 yards. The diameter here should be 22 centimeters, and then we have 3.14 times 22 is 69.08 centimeters. The diameter here should be 68 kilometers. And then we have 3.14 times 68, which gives us 213.52 kilometers. Let's look at a couple word problems. Pause this video and give these a try. All right, so if I'm looking at this bike wheel and I know that the diameter is 10 inches, what is the circumference of this wheel? So I take the diameter of 10 and I multiply it by 3.14, and I get 31.4 inches. Now this one tells me that the minute hand of the clock is 16 inches long, and I want to find the distance it travels in 1 hour. The minute hand only goes halfway across the clock, so it's the same as a radius, which means I need, in order to find the diameter, to double this. So the diameter is 32 inches times 3.14 is 100.48 inches. So in 1 hour, the tip of the minute hand will travel 100.48 inches. Now these are a little bit different. These tell us the perimeter and one side, and we want to then find what the missing sides are. Pause this video and give these a try. All right, so if we know that the perimeter is 38 yards, and we know that this side is 7 yards, in a rectangle, the opposite side must also be the same. So we have 7 yards and 7 yards. So I can take my 38-yard perimeter minus 14 yards, because I've already accounted for 7 and 7, and I have 24 yards left to distribute among these two sides. Now if I take 24 and divide it by 2, I get 12, which means that this side has to be 12 yards and this side has to be 12 yards. Now this one, again, I see that I have a perimeter of 44 inches and this is 12, which means this must also be 12. So if I take 44 minus 24, I get 20, and 20 divided by 2 is 10. So these both sides must be 10. And on this last one, I have 72, and this side is 10, which means this side must also be 10. So 72 minus 20 is 52, which means these sides must be 26. Do the same thing, except now we have circles and we know what the circumference of the circle is. But we want to find the measure of the radius or the diameter. All right, so we know that in a circle, circumference equals pi times the diameter. Now, if we know already what the circumference is, so here we know that the circumference is 36.3 equals pi, which we know is 3.14, times the diameter. This is just like our other problems where we are solving for an exponent. If I know that 36.3 is 3.14 times the diameter, I can divide both sides by 3.14. Remember, if I do it on one side of the equal sign, I must also do it on the other side. And I get 11.56 yards equals our diameter. Now, this is a much longer decimal answer. It's actually 11.56050955, but I'm rounding to 2 decimal places because, again, that is close enough for our purposes. So I know that the diameter is 11.56 yards, but in this picture here, the dotted line is showing me the radius. So in order to find the radius, I need to take this answer, 11.56, and divide it by 2 so that I get the radius equals 5.78 yards. Now again with this one, I'm going to take 100 feet divided by 3.14, and I get 31.85 is my diameter. But again, my radius, I'm going to divide that by 2, and I get that my radius is 15.93 feet. And again, I'm rounding to 2 decimal places. All right, and this last one, I have 56.5 inches divided by 3.14. So I have 17.99 inches is my diameter, which means that my radius is going to be that diameter divided by 2. My answer is 8.995. Now, if I'm rounding to 2 decimal places, because this is a 5, it will push this 9 to become a 10, which in turn will push this 9 to become a 10, which in turn will push this to just be 9. So our radius is 9 inches if we're rounding.